everyone, welcome back to This Homemade Life. In case you're new, my name is Courtney, and every single Monday I bring you guys one of these What's for Dinner videos where I highlight the meals that I made for my family of 5 over the last week. I let you guys know all the recipes that we loved and every once in a while, the recipes that we didn't. This week was not one of those weeks though. We loved everything that I made this week. They were all hits. I will be upfront and saying I was not feeling very well this week, so I did not eat a lot of the meals, but I did cook them because my family still had to eat no matter how I felt. And they all got rave reviews, mostly from my husband and my oldest son. So that means a lot. If they liked them, they are probably really good meals. Anyway, I do want to take a minute once again and just thank you guys for being here with me. I continue to see a lot of growth on my channel, and I love that. It's really exciting, and I'm excited for you guys to be joining me here and see all the things that I'm working on and that I'm doing. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything you want to see, request, something like that, let me know down below in the description box, in the comments, and let's see what we can make happen. Anyway, that's enough chatting. Let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at all these delicious dinners plus one dessert. All right, guys, so for our first dinner this week, I wanted to start off with this simple side dish. This is just kind of to show you how easy it is to dress up some frozen veggies. I have 2 bags of frozen broccoli cauliflower mix. You can buy them at any grocery store. They're like $1 a bag at Walmart. I just seasoned them up. Dill, salt, pepper, garlic powder, a little bit of olive oil, onion powder, roasted them at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. They were completely frozen when they went in the oven. Roasted up beautifully, an awesome side dish, and it just dresses up those frozen veggies just a little bit to shake things up. All right, so let's move on to the actual dinner portion of this. I'm making fish cakes, which I have made before on my channel, but I thought I would share them again. Originally, the recipe was from Jen Chapin, but I've kind of changed it up. Every time I make it, I change it up. So I'm starting tonight with the dipping sauce for these. I started off with some mayonnaise, and to that, I added a little bit of lemon juice. I'm sure fresh is better, but I always use the stuff that you keep in your refrigerator. I just think it's so nice and simple and easy. And then I like to add dill because you guys know I love dill, and I think it pairs beautifully with fish. So I had some fresh dill still left in my fridge, and I just went to work chopping that up straight into the mayonnaise and lemon juice. Now, if you had dried dill, that would be fine too. And really, you can add any herbs you want. If you've got fresh parsley, that would be beautiful in here. I really think almost any fresh herb would be amazing. And then as far as dried herbs go, shake it up and do what you like. I ended up adding in some garlic powder, onion powder, parsley, and chives. I think that was all I added in here. And it was beautiful. It's kind of like a little bit of a play on ranch, but not quite. It was so good. And like I said, every time I make this, I change something up about it. But I will try to link the original recipe down below. If I can't find Jen Chapin's video, I'll try to maybe link the first video where I made it. But originally it did come from her cookbook, Pantry Essentials. I've just kind of played with it and done my own thing with it. That's kind of how I do a lot of recipes in the kitchen. I think recipes are great for giving you a starting point and an idea. And once you make them, you know what you like and what you don't like. And you just kind of grow and adapt them over time into something that your family really, really enjoys. And that's basically what I have done with this. My family ended up loving these fish cakes, and I have tried them a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different ingredients. And let me tell you, they have never let us down. And each time I think might be a little bit better than the last. The sauce is what I was playing with more than anything today. Typically, I think I keep it a lot simpler than this, but I added a lot more herbs to it this time, and no regrets there. None at all. If you're looking to use up some herbs that you have in your fridge, or if you're growing some and just need a use for them, this sauce is so delicious, and I think it would probably be good on some chicken as well, not just for fish. And of course, if you just had like frozen fish planks or something, this would be fantastic in place of tartar sauce. Just something a little bit different. It's got this really fresh, summery taste to it, and we really thoroughly enjoyed it. But all I'm doing is just kind of tasting and adding a few extra things. You always want to taste when you cook and make sure it tastes the way you want it to. And this needed just a little more kick to it. So I added in a few more herbs and a few more seasonings just to kind of brighten the flavors up a bit. And I like to use a pretty good amount of lemon juice just to cut back on the richness of the mayonnaise. Could you make this with sour cream? I don't really see why not. It would change the flavor, or even Greek yogurt. It would change the flavor, but it would probably be a little bit better for you in the long run. So if you guys try it, let me know. So in this bowl, I do have some tilapia fillets. That's what I use today. They are a great price at Sam's Club. I know they're not as healthy as like salmon or something like that, but this is very cost effective. Could you use canned meat like canned salmon or canned tuna? Absolutely. I just find this to be a little bit more our style. We don't love canned fish, but we do enjoy just regular frozen fish that I cook. So I seasoned it with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika. But if you have another flavor profile you like or a seasoning blend, go for it. You don't have to use the exact seasonings I'm using here. This is just kind of what my family likes. So to make the actual fish cakes, I started off by adding in some mayonnaise. That is our binder. We don't need eggs or anything in here. Mayonnaise is going to hold everything together. I added in some lemon juice, and I'm going to add in some breadcrumbs. And I kind of just do this by sight and feel. And then when I mix it all together, that's when the fish just kind of beautifully flakes apart. It keeps it a little light and fluffy so it's not just completely pulverized. When you make your fish cakes, it gives it some extra texture. I will say if you make this with cod, it holds together better and doesn't fall apart as much. So you do get some larger chunks of fish in your fish cakes. So if you like that, you might want to try a different fish. Tilapia it just falls right apart. Also, you could try your fish, if you buy it and you thaw it, chopping it up and just doing this with raw fish if you wanted to. I have done that on one other occasion and they turned out beautifully. So if you're looking for texture or something, they do make a big difference. So and now I'm just going to season these the fish cakes. I'm adding in some more fresh dill. I really needed to use up most of this dill. It had been in my fridge for a little bit and I didn't want to waste it. So I went to town adding it here. And I did add a little bit of dried dill just because it kind of adds a little extra flavor. And then I added in the same seasonings that I used when I cooked the fish. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and I don't think I added in any extra paprika this time. Sometimes I do add in extra, but I think the amount that I had on the fish when I originally cooked it was going to work just fine. Now, once I get this all mixed together, I like to pop it in my fridge just to let it chill a little bit before I form the patties. And I find that it helps them hold together a little bit better, just letting the mayonnaise chill a little bit. Now, for us, it's only myself, my husband, and my oldest that will eat these. My two younger children do not care for fish. And one of them couldn't eat this anyway because it's got ingredients you can't have. So I was only making 3 fish patties. So I cooked just enough salmon to make, or just enough tilapia to make 3 fish patties. And that's what's great. You can cook as much or as little as you need to make these. Originally, I made small fish patties, which I think is what Jen Chapin did. But after the first time or two, I discovered I prefer just making one big patty for each of us. We just prefer it that way. My fish is already totally cooked because I roasted it in the oven. So we're not even worried about cooking these all the way through. We're just going to cook these on the stovetop to get a nice, beautiful crust on the outside. So the big patties work perfectly. I did put some oil in the bottom of my skillet. You can really use any kind of neutral cooking oil that you want, avocado oil, vegetable oil, peanut oil, corn oil. I think I actually use some olive oil because that's what's typically sitting next to my stovetop. And I just put these over a medium heat and I just kind of moved them around a little bit in the pan to make sure they weren't sticking and that they were evenly cooking all around that one side before I went and flipped them over. Because the burner is centered under this pan, I find that the middle part of the pan often cooks a little bit higher than the outsides. So the part of the fish cake that's on the outer side of the pan is not browning as beautifully as the part that's in the center. So if I just give them a little spin, they tend to get a much more even, beautiful golden brown on the outside. And that golden brown is exactly what we're looking for. Like I said, we've already seasoned these. They're fully cooked all the way through. There's no raw ingredients left in here. We're just building some extra flavor on the outside with that beautiful crust right there. And that imparts so much flavor in these things. Like I said earlier, these are a family favorite. My husband and my oldest get so excited when I make these. They taste delicious. So, so good. And if you're looking for a different way to use up some fish in your freezer or some canned fish in your pantry, this is a great option, guys. I paired it with some bread with some honey butter, some couscous, some those roasted vegetables, and of course that beautiful sauce. On to the next night. This is where I deviated from my meal plan. So I woke up this day and I didn't exactly feel 100% myself. But at that point, nothing was completely wrong. My husband did let me know that we had an appointment that evening for my kids to try out a new karate school. So the meal I was planning on cooking was not going to work because we were not going to be home until much later. I either would have to cook something really fast when we got home or prep food before we left and we would just reheat it later. So I decided I was just going to save what I was going to cook, the magic crispy baked shrimp, and make this. This is an easy, simple dish. Meatballs from the freezer, a can of cranberry sauce, and some of that chili sauce. Cook it all day and serve it over rice. And of course, I served it with a salad. You can use any kind of fruit, jam, or jelly you want. Even pepper jelly is really good. I was just using what was in my pantry. So here's a dessert I'm sharing because I felt like I kind of cheated you guys on that last meal. It was so simple. You guys have got to make it. It tastes amazing, but it really was that a fair recipe to share? Probably not. So I am making, oh my, I'm going to butcher this because I don't have a very good accent. Frescas con crema. Somebody call me out because I'm sure I totally butchered that. Anyway, it's just like strawberries and cream. We used to live close to this place that served a lot of different kind of Mexican fruit treats and different flavored waters like banana water and stuff. This was my favorite thing to get there. I found a recipe online, which I will link below in the description box. And I kind of used it as a baseline because one thing that I noticed was different was the place I always went, it had like some sort of whipped cream or something mixed into their sauce. So I changed one ingredient. I made my own Cool Whip. And then I added in the rest of the ingredients the recipe calls for, which were sour cream and condensed milk. I'm gently folding everything together because I want to keep that beautiful frothiness from the whipped cream that I made. And that to me was something that I loved about this when I used to get it. It was like light and airy and frothy. It wasn't a heavy cream sauce and it had so much flavor. This does not take an entire can of sweetened condensed milk. I really poured about half a can in there. It's just very syrupy and caramely, so it pours out slowly. But there I am, just kind of folding it in together. And I am just going to pour this over some fresh sliced strawberries, which you guys saw me get last week in my grocery haul. This is so good. Oh my gosh, so delicious. The strawberries were still a little tart because they're not perfectly in season yet. And that sweet cream sauce was amazing. All right, so this was on my meal plan. I am going to make chilaquiles. Probably butchering that word too. I am so sorry. So this is a recipe I've been wanting to try for a long time. It's been on like my cooking bucket list. And this one is for a Salsa Verde chilaquiles. So I'm going to make this. I didn't actually eat any because at this point my migraine had kicked in full blast and I was just not feeling well at all. So I made this for my husband and my son. I peeled all of those tomatillos as I showed you. You just pull the husk right off. And they're a little bit sticky, so they'll get your hands sticky, but it's fine. No big deal. It washes right off. I threw them in a boiling pot of water with a couple of their best friends, which are onion and peppers. I used one jalapeno and one poblano pepper. And then I put everything in this blender to just pulverize it. I didn't include any of the cooking liquid. It's not necessary. I just made sure that everybody made it out of the pot. I did seed the peppers because I threw them in whole and let them boil in there. So I did have to cut the stems off and try to pull some of the seeds and ribs out. I don't like the texture of seeds in my salsa. They don't soften up. They're like just a weird texture in the middle of a liquidious thing. So I don't care for it. So I tried to get most of them out, but then I added in a little bit of cilantro. I'm using that lightly dried stuff, which I think is fantastic. And I added in some lime juice, and then I just let this stuff get all pulverized in the blender, and we had some salsa verde. You can add salt and pepper if you want. I kind of prefer a more natural taste, so I didn't. This is great with chips. This is great on nachos. It's great on tacos, and it's really great in chilaquiles. So the recipe I found didn't call for this, but I had this one lone steak just hanging out in my freezer, so I was making this. It was a pretty decent sized steak, so I just seasoned him up with some salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and I'm just going to cook him for a few minutes on each side and get a beautiful crust because that's where all that beautiful flavor is. This is enough steak for two people because it was pretty good sized. And like I said, I was not eating any because I was not feeling well at this point, but I'd already thawed this. I had everything ready to go, so I went ahead and cooked it for everyone else. My husband and my oldest said this was fantastic. So once the steak was cooked all the way through, I pulled it off and let it sit for just a little bit so that it could rest and I wouldn't like let all the juices run out. It wouldn't get dry and yucky. And then I just kind of chopped it up into bite-sized pieces. So while that was resting, I did go ahead and start cooking the tortilla strips. So I took 2 or 3 corn tortillas, I can't remember, and just sliced them into thin strips, like bite-sized kind of strips. And I'm putting them in some oil. I put too much oil in my pan, so don't do what I did. I didn't know how much I was going to need because the recipe didn't say. It just said oil in the bottom of the pan. unless I misread it. That could have happened too, but I didn't see where it said that. So I just poured some in and it ended up being too much, but that's okay. We're just kind of cooking these and getting them a little bit crispy and toasted on the outside. So at this point, the amount of oil doesn't matter. Just as long as they're, able to move freely about the pan and kind of fry up a little bit, that's all that matters. Stir them a lot though, because they will burn if you're not careful. Mine did not. I stayed on top of them and I stirred them like once every minute or two, and they toasted beautifully. And it really does make the dish. You've got to get these toasted up like this because we're going to mix in a sauce in a minute and you don't want them to be soggy. They really do hold their texture pretty well in this particular dish. So I ended up just using a paper towel to kind of mop up some of the extra oil that's in that pan because it was just too much. A little bit of oil would have been fine, but that was a lot of oil left in there. So I just kind of wiped that around until I had absorbed most of what was left in the pan. And now we're going to add in that beautiful salsa verde that I made just a few minutes ago. It's going to be like a cooking sauce for this. And I'm also going to throw that steak that I chopped up back in here. This is a serving for one person. I was cooking for my oldest because he had things to do and I needed to get his dinner done. I made it fresh for my husband later when he got home. But anyway, you just want to saute this in a skillet for just a couple of minutes to cook some of the liquid out of the salsa verde. Really, it took like 2 minutes, maybe 3. And while this was all cooking and doing its thing, I did have 2 eggs frying in a skillet next to this because my son did say he wanted fried eggs on top, which I have seen everywhere. It seems like the traditional thing to do is throw some fried eggs on. So I had 2 frying for him because he loves his eggs. And once they were done, this was, good to go. See how the moisture has absorbed and it's, like thick and it's adhered to the tortillas and stuff. That's what you want. I just made sure that my eggs were all nice and perfectly cooked. And then I'm going to plate this with the tortillas and sauce and steak on the bottom. And then I will put those fried eggs on top. Again, I didn't eat this, but I did try the salsa a couple of days later when I felt better and it was delicious. And my husband and my oldest loved this meal. They said they would totally want it again. You could serve it with any meat you want, chicken, whatever, or no meat at all. Any of that is fine. And there is a recipe somewhere for red sauce. I just chose the salsa verde. So if you guys try the red sauce, let me know. I bet it's fantastic. All right, so this last recipe is for crack chicken and dumplings. Now, in all fairness, neither my husband nor myself are fans of chicken and dumplings. But this didn't look like chicken and dumplings. So I really thought, okay, I'm going to try this. And you know what? It turned out amazing. I would definitely recommend this to everyone. Like I said, we don't like chicken and dumplings, but this had so much flavor. The dumplings were light and fluffy and delicious. This was just awesome. So I started off with 3 chicken thighs that I seasoned with salt and pepper. I put them in a sauce, well, not a saucepan, in my pot that I'm going to cook the soup in with a little bit of oil in the bottom. Originally, I was going to thaw chicken breast strips or chicken tenderloins, but I guess I grabbed the wrong package. So we are working with chicken thighs today, and that's okay. Sometimes that's just the way it works out. It all tastes great in the end. No big deal. But you want to cook these first in your skillet to go ahead and get some color on both sides just to add some extra flavor. I mean, you could cook this chicken any way you want. You can boil it or whatever. But this adds an extra layer of flavor that changes the dish to me because one of the things I don't care for about chicken and dumplings is the boiled chicken. I don't like the taste of boiled chicken. It's so bland. I don't like it. This was not bland. This was delicious. So I pulled it out of the skillet. It's not fully cooked. No worries. We're going to cook it in the soup later. Not a big deal. I'm letting it kind of cool for a minute so that all the juices kind of redistribute and everything. And I toss a little bit of butter into my pan, and then I'm going to add in 1 diced onion, the whole onion for me because it was not very big. If you've got like a really big onion, you're probably just going to want to do like half of it. But again, mine was small. To that, I also added in a little bit of garlic, and then I've got some Italian seasoning. I'll link the recipe below. I think it called for like dried basil and dried parsley, but I saw my Italian seasoning and I'm like, why not? A little extra is never going to hurt anyone. And this was delicious. So I added it all in, stirred everything up, let it just kind of hang out in the pan and develop some flavor, all that kind of stuff. I did not add any salt or pepper into this. The chicken does have salt on it, and we're going to add something else later that is really high in sodium, so I didn't add anything else. I did toss in some flour, and we're going to make a little bit of a roux. The recipe called for a lot of flour, like a lot more than I would have expected, so I just went with it. That's why you saw me add extra. I'm like, oh, it's not just like 2 tablespoons. You guys want like 1/3 of a cup, so that's what I put in. I'm going to let that cook for a few minutes because you really want to cook out that flour taste. If you don't, you will taste raw flour in your dish, and that just doesn't taste good. That's not what you want. Cooking it like this cooks out that flavor. You'll never even know that there's any flour in this dish. I did feel like my pan was looking a little bit dry, so I went ahead and added just a little bit more oil in there. You don't want to burn anything, and you don't want it to get too dry because then it doesn't form the right kind of roux. It looked better after a little squeeze of oil. And now you're going to add chicken broth in a minute. I don't keep chicken broth or chicken stock, but I do have that chicken base. So I added that in, and because it's like a gel kind of substance, I like to put it in a hot skillet if I can and cook it for a few minutes before I add any of my liquids, which is what you guys saw me do. So the recipe calls for a cup of heavy cream, which I didn't have, but I had half and half, which is perfectly great. And I went ahead and poured that in. And then it also called for 4 cups of chicken broth, which I'm not a soup person either. Like I like thick stews and stuff, but I don't really like thin soups. So I went ahead and only added in about 2.5 cups. And as it cooks, if I feel like I need some more, I'm going to add some more. I did realize that I didn't add enough chicken base for the amount of water I was supposed to put in there. So you did see me add just a little bit more in there. And then we're going to cook this and let it start to thicken. Now, do keep in mind how thick you see it before you add the dumplings is not how thick it's going to be at the end. There's a lot of flour and starch in the dumplings, and it's going to cook off and thicken this even more. So keep that in mind. So let's make some dumplings. It's super simple. 1 cup of flour, a little bit of baking soda, some salt, and some buttermilk. That is it. Oh, and a little bit melted butter. Got to have some melted butter. Now, I didn't have any buttermilk, but I did have some milk, and I had some lemon juice, and boom, I had buttermilk. So I'm adding that in. I mixed everything together and just set it off to the side to let it sit for a few minutes. So it was ready when I needed it. And I didn't feel rushed to have to make it at the last second or anything. It was just kind of over there hanging out for me. And that's fine. It allows the flour to really soak up those liquids that we added in there. And it makes the dough better in the end anyway. So not a big deal. So while that was setting off to the side and my stuff is still coming up to a boil again so it can thicken, I did decide to go ahead and chop up the chicken. Now, the recipe says to shred it. I don't love shredded chicken just because it's kind of stringy. I mean, I shred it sometimes and it's not a big deal. Everybody uses shredded chicken and that's fine. But if I have the option not to, I'm probably going to avoid it. So I decided to just go ahead and chop this up into chunks, which worked out great. So I just chopped up each piece of this chicken into nice little tiny bite-sized chunks that would fit on my spoon with a little bit of vegetable and a little bit of dumpling, and it was going to be perfect. It only took a couple of minutes and I got it all taken care of. And then I set that off to the side as well. And as you can tell, most of it's cooked, but there's a little bit of pink left in there, which, like I said before, not a big deal because it's going to cook in the soup for a few more minutes anyway. This didn't take long at all. It probably took me just as long to do this as it would have to shred it. So I don't think that this was, any extra time invested or anything like that. I just prefer the texture this way. But you guys do whatever works for you. So now this has started to thicken up. And like I said, remember, we're adding in some starchy stuff, so it's going to thicken even more. I went ahead and poured in all of that chicken that I just chopped up. And then the recipe calls for bacon. You're supposed to cook it yourself, but I have these bacon pieces, and that's so much easier. So I just threw in a little bit of those. I'd say probably about somewhere between 1/4 cup and 1/3 of a cup. Looked about good to me. I didn't measure, but that's about where it was. And then the recipe calls for peas. I had originally thought about putting peas and carrots in there, but I had some peas just sitting in my freezer, and I went ahead and poured those in and then realized, well, that's not quite enough peas. So I ended up having to go open another bag of peas to dump them in. One important thing to remember, don't use canned peas if you can. They will just kind of mush up and fall apart. Frozen peas have a totally different texture, and they're going to hold up really well in this. So definitely use frozen. I also added in a package of ranch dressing mix, which is why I'm not adding any salt in this. There's a ton of salt in that stuff. And that is where a bunch of the flavor comes from. So once I've added all of this stuff back in, it's time to work on the dumplings. We're just going to use a little teeny tiny cookie scoop and add the dumplings to the top of the soup. It's super simple. It only takes a couple of minutes. You don't have to cut anything or roll it out or any of that. It is so easy. Once you have put all of these in, just kind of mush them down on the top to make sure that they go all the way down in the liquid. It's okay if they're floating. Just make sure some liquid gets on top. This helps with the cooking process. And then you want to put your lid on top of your pot and simmer this for 15 to 20 minutes. I went ahead and did 20 just to err on the side of caution with that chicken to make sure it was fully cooked all the way through. And you guys, these dumplings were amazing. They were light and fluffy and airy on the inside. They weren't just dough balls. They were fantastic. I know you can use like regular biscuit dough that you buy in the refrigerator section and chop it up, but I think this turns out much, much, much better. It only takes a couple of minutes. It's ingredients we all have on hand. So I would highly, highly recommend making your own because wow, these were delicious. Anyway, once this was done, the recipe called for cheese in the soup. You all know my oldest does not eat cheese, so I just put the cheese on top of everyone's individual bowl that wanted it, and that was dinner, and it was amazing. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this week's What's for Dinner video. I feel like there's a ton of meals this week that I would totally make again. I'm not a fan of chicken and dumplings, and neither is my husband. That was such a surprise that we love that. Even my oldest, I never expected him to love it either, and by golly, that meal was a hit. May see that one again. I don't know. It's warming up in Texas, so I might have to steer clear of some soups for a while, just until the weather chills out a little bit. We'll see. Anyway, guys, thanks again for joining me here, and I will see you guys on Wednesday with another video. Have an awesome week, everyone. Bye.